Welcome everyone. Good morning and welcome back to day 2. We'll be starting in a few minutes. As everyone gets settled in, we'll be back with you shortly. Thanks. Hello, thanks to everyone for joining us. It looks like we're ready to get started, so I'm going to stop screen share and kick it over to Kristen Dailey to welcome us into our second day. Kristen?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to day 2 of the 2020 Goalmakers National Forum. I'm Kristen Dailey. I'm the Executive Director of Global Washington, your host for the forum. Yesterday, our speakers covered topics ranging from natural capital to the recent US election and what 2021 might look like for global development. 9 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, were covered in our breakout sessions with lively conversations. And while we covered a variety of topics yesterday, the common thread was this notion of building toward the future with intention for greater equity. COVID has disrupted the work of global development in so many ways, but has also given us an opportunity to reimagine what we do for our relationships and our systems. This is not going to happen with a flip of a switch. It's going to take time, and it's going to take the dedication of all of you who are joining us today. You are what we call the goal makers for global development, those that work every day to improve lives for people in low and middle income countries. I'm so glad that you are here today to continue the conversation. Please continue to engage with each other through the Whova platform that we have. And if you haven't clicked around to the community boards or the exhibit halls, then you're really missing out. For example, there's lots of giveaways in the exhibit hall. You can enter your name and win gifts from around the world. You can also win some services. For example, there's one company called Avanade that is giving away 800 hours of consulting services that provides workshops and trainings in digital skills. So check it out. So let's get started with today's keynote speakers. First, you will hear from Kate Behncken, who is the Vice President and Lead for Microsoft Philanthropies. A link to Kate's full bio is in your agenda, but I just want to briefly highlight a few things. Kate has over 20 years of international experience with Microsoft in a variety of leadership roles, including Chief of Staff to Microsoft's President, Brad Smith. Kate will be interviewed by Jason Hunke, who's the Vice President of Communications at Vulcan, where he leads the communication activities for the philanthropic initiatives founded by Paul and Jody Allen. Thank you both for being here today. And with that, Jason, I'll turn it over to you to get started.
Thank you, Kristen. And hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be with you today. I was really inspired by the parts of the program I could catch yesterday, and I'm equally inspired to be with Kate today. So Kate, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Jason. Great to talk with you.
I'll kick us off. So you've been in your role leading Microsoft Philanthropies for about 2 years, one of which we've spent in a global pandemic. So I have a 2-part question. Part 1, what was the most surprising thing you learned about Microsoft Philanthropies when you took the helm? And part 2, what would our audience be most surprised to learn about Microsoft Philanthropies that maybe they didn't know?
Well, yes, I mean, I've been in the role for about 1.5 years, and I will say for sure, I never expected a global pandemic in my first year in this role. And I think probably, as everybody can relate, in some ways it's been a little bit of a roller coaster. The problems being created by the pandemic or being exacerbated by the pandemic were snowballing early on, and some days were just really overwhelming. We only have so many resources, and some days it was how much can we really help. But other days, and I would say most days, I'm just so thankful to be in a position to be able to help in many different ways. So I think for that one, the surprise is not so much about Philanthropies, but certainly how the first 18 months would play out. In terms of your question about what would people be surprised to learn about Philanthropies, I think how much a focus on social impact and purpose is really a part of Microsoft's core DNA, and also how the portfolio of work has evolved over the years. It really started 37 years ago when Bill Gates launched the employee engagement program, and that program has grown and grown. And this year, for example, employee donations and match are already over $200 million. We have a very generous and very engaged employee community. And the GIVE program is just one part of what we do. We have a broad portfolio. We anchor a lot of the work that we do on inclusive economic opportunity, which includes skills for employability. We help nonprofits leverage technology to build capacity, to do more, scale more, advance their own missions. We have disaster relief work, humanitarian work, affordable housing, and we invest in strategic communities around the world. As everyone on this call would know, Philanthropies is really not just about writing a check, although of course we do that as part of our grants program, but we have strategic partnerships with so many amazing organisations all around the world, and many of those partnerships have been nurtured over many, many years. And of course, we also have some great new partnerships with both public and private sector.
Thank you. Let's talk more about the work. How do you think about the Sustainable Development Goals, in which SDGs are specific priorities in the work? I know you have a new partnership with UNICEF, you work on digital inclusion, you talked about some of your other program areas, but how do the SDGs fit into that?
Yeah, Microsoft focuses on 4 key SDGs, but also contributes to many of the other SDGs. The 4 areas of focus are addressing the digital skills divide, supporting humanitarian action to build stronger communities, using technology to protect the planet. So those areas align to SDG 4, quality education, 8, decent work and economic growth, SDG 13, climate action, and then 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. The focus when we think about SDG 4 and 8, a focus on skilling and education for employability and the ability to earn a livelihood. This has been a focus for us for a long time, well before COVID. It will be a focus after COVID, but it's certainly become more important during COVID. There's almost no industry that has been impacted in some way by digital transformation, and there's almost no job that doesn't require some level of digital literacy. And as roles are evolving, new skills are required. So one of the things that Microsoft did back at the end of June with LinkedIn, we launched a global skills initiative to help 25 million people around the world get new digital skills for in-demand roles in the digital economy. And we really looked at this in 3 ways. We worked with LinkedIn and leveraged their data to identify those in-demand jobs and the skills needed to fill them. We provided free access to content and curriculum, and then provided low-cost certifications and job-seeking tools to actually help people who get the skills connect to the jobs. And you also mentioned the partnership with UNICEF. We've actually been partnering with UNICEF for many years. And one of the ways that we've helped disconnected students around the world continue their education during COVID is through a project that we have with UNICEF called Learning Passport, which is a platform. You can put any kind of content on it. It has online and offline capabilities. And this was originally focused on helping students and young people, refugees and displaced people all around the world continue their education. The idea was that if they were on the move, then education should be on the move with them. But when COVID hit, we both expanded and accelerated the program to help mitigate the impact of COVID that COVID was having on students around the world, so that they could continue learning. And so countries with a digital curriculum can leverage Learning Passport to facilitate online learning for students that have devices at home. And over the next year, the goal with that project with Learning Passport is to deploy Learning Passport in 20 countries around the world to help provide access at scale to online and offline learning.
Excellent, thank you. Speaking more about COVID, we know that it will be a long and slow road, but we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel for global health and global economic recovery in 2021. When we touched base last week, you mentioned there'd been a silver lining in the pandemic in both how you work internally and externally. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, the global pandemic has affected everyone, everyone in some way, and obviously to hugely varying degrees. But you know, there is nothing quite as unifying as a global pandemic. And so internally at Microsoft, we've seen incredible energy and collaboration across the company to help, perhaps in ways that I haven't seen it before. And when you look externally, all stakeholders have been impacted. And so if there is a silver lining, it's perhaps this collective urgency between stakeholders to address it, to come together and help rebuild the economy. Unemployment numbers are soaring, and so skilling and reskilling is top of the agenda for many governments. Private sector's impacted as they need to reskill employees for remote work, this new world of work, this hybrid work, and new jobs. I think tech companies like Microsoft are leaning in even more, feeling the responsibility to help ensure that everyone has access to the digital skills needed to participate in this new economy and this new world of work. And obviously nonprofits and NGOs are under immense pressure to serve more beneficiaries than ever before. I think the collective urgency that everyone is feeling has led to increased collaboration and partnerships, and also more appetite, I think, to partner in new ways. And this collaboration is essential. These issues, as everyone knows, are just too massive for any one company or government or one industry to tackle alone. There's a great quote that I read that I just love, and I agree with it so much. It's, if you want to go wide, you go with government. If you want to go deep, you go with NGOs and academic institutions. If you want to go fast, you go with the private sector. And if you want to go far, you must go together. And I think it's so true. We've got a long road to an inclusive recovery ahead of us. And so we really need to go together. I think there's a lot that we all want to leave behind in 2020, but there's definitely, for us, there's definitely some learnings that may inform our work moving forward. There was an urgency and a kind of a scrappiness to get things done, do more, move faster. And I think it would behoove us to hang on to some of that.
I love that. And that quote really speaks to me, and I'm sure many people today. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Another reality of the pandemic is many of us on this call have the ability and the privilege to have worked from home. I've been parked in front of this very computer at home since March 6th. Right. But let's take a human moment. What's maybe a funny work from home story you could share, or a lesson that you've learned about yourself these last 10 months while we've been grappling with just a different way of working?
Well, I think I have a lot, and I've been parked here since March as well. Although I've moved rooms a few times. I've got two boys, 10 and 11, and where I have my office set up, I looked, I was on a call one day, an external call, kind of a lot of people, and I look out the window, and my youngest son, who was 9 at the time, was hanging from the basketball hoop, and my older evil son had had got him up there with the ladder and then had taken the ladder, and he was kind of just hanging from the basketball hoop. So I think I've got many of those stories, and I've got very good, I think, at keeping a poker face and trying to work out how much danger they're really in.
Nice. I'm sure many people can relate to that. Let me do 2 more questions. I think we have about 6 minutes. Any more, in your experience, a year and a half in the role, what are you seeing internationally that those of us in global development should pay more attention to? Is there an exemplar that comes to mind, or something you've seen in the last year and a half that really caught your eye in the sector?
Yeah, I think, one of the last trips I did in person was at the end of last year, and I was in Geneva for the Global Refugee Forum, and it was terrific and brought a lot of stakeholders together, and there were quite a few from the private sector there. And one thing I really noticed was kind of what I was saying before. There was just this, and this is obviously before COVID, but there was such an appetite between the private sector to think about how to partner together. And I think particularly in that world, you've always had private sector partnering with nonprofit and UN organizations, but there just seemed to be more discussion about, hey, how can we all sort of learn what we're all doing in the private sector, and maybe how can we come together and leverage our respective resources and do more. So I think that there's just an opportunity to think about partnering in new ways. One of the things that we've done at Microsoft over the last year and a half is partner with some of our largest customers on joint philanthropic initiatives related to skilling or related to AI for good. And there's been just a fantastic response. With this work, it really is a case of the more the merrier. And we just find that people bring their respective strengths and expertise, and we can have greater impact if we come together in new ways.
And bring more people into the work.
Yeah, exactly.
Final question. I know you believe for-profit companies like Microsoft can do both good in the world and do well with their bottom line. And we believe that businesses and nonprofits can and should learn from each other. In that spirit, I would guess that about 40% of the audience today come from the nonprofit sector and are working on the front lines. As a business leader, what tough love piece of advice might you give our nonprofit friends as they work to make more impact in the world?
It's a good question. I think firstly, your point about profit and purpose, that really resonates with me. Philanthropies and social impact work within companies is perhaps less siloed than it has been before. I mentioned earlier, there's just an incredible interest and appetite across Microsoft for the social impact work that Microsoft is doing. And we've always had that interest, but I feel like it's at an all-time high. I think also people sometimes see the concepts of profit and purpose as being in conflict, that they can't truly exist together. But more and more we're seeing the private sector talk about profit and purpose and how each can potentially fuel the other. And also more and more we're seeing employees demand it. In terms of tough love, I think it's something probably that we've had to focus on ourselves and give our own tough love to our team. And that's making sure that you really stay focused on where you can add unique value. I think that's really, really key. And it's hard to focus because then you have to sometimes stop doing work or say no. And particularly with the work we do, you really want to say yes to everyone, but you just can't. And for us, our unique value is leveraging our employee base. It's our digital skills work for employability. It's how we leverage technology. It's how we invest in strategic communities. So I think the tough love is perhaps not something specific to nonprofits. It's applicable to all companies and organizations. And that's really stay true to where you can uniquely add value. We couldn't do the work that we do without so many amazing partnerships with so many amazing nonprofits around the world. And it's the nonprofits that bring their unique expertise or their unique engagement in particular communities that makes that partnership work. So yeah, that's my tough love.
I'll take it. And trade-offs are so important because they're so difficult,
Right.
but I appreciate that. Kate, thank you for the conversation today.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Great to chat with you.
Likewise. Kristen.
Jason, Kate, thank you so much for that really forward-thinking conversation. Kate, I love your perspective on partnering. So thank you for joining us today. It really makes me hopeful for the future. So thank you. Our next session will be led by Akhtar Badshah, who previously had Kate's position at Microsoft Philanthropies. And Akhtar has recently wrote a book called A Purpose Mindset: How Microsoft Inspires Employees and Alumni to Change the World. A link to Akhtar's book will be posted in the chat. And Akhtar will be joined today by Poole and Tazin Shadid, who are both featured in Akhtar's book and are former Microsoft employees. Akhtar, I'll welcome you to the virtual stage and you can start the conversation.
Kate, thank you very much. And I'm thrilled to be joined with Poole and Tazin, our Global Washington Hero for 2020. And, Kate's conversation kind of set up this conversation around purpose and business and purpose and profits. And I wrote this book because of my 10 years at Microsoft leading this effort, but also to try and get a sense of why individuals in highly competitive environments also are drawn into purpose and what kind of catalysts are needed to make that happen. I believe purpose is the renewable source of energy that continues to drive humanity forward. Purpose is a vital component of self and collective discovery, which also then allows us to extend the common good. Kate mentioned that 37 years ago, Bill Gates launched the employee giving campaign or the program. It was actually Mary Gates, Bill's mother, who in 1983 got Bill Gates to start a very small employee payroll deduction program so that employees could just donate to United Way by having it deducted through the payroll. And that moment could have just been a moment and would not have turned into a movement which last year raised cumulatively $224 million. Because certain things happened. One, Bill Newcomb joined the company in 1985 as the chief legal officer. And upon his joining, he asked Bill and John Shirley, who was the president of the company, that he would like to also have community affairs as part of his portfolio, in addition to industry affairs, corporate affairs, government affairs, and of course, legal affairs. I could understand all of that, except why community affairs? And Bill Newcomb said that here are these 20-something highly energetic, hard-working employees from all over the country and around the world trying to make change through technology. Yet they will eventually establish roots in this community, get married here, have kids here, have an extended understanding of what the community is all about. And there has to be a way by which a company provides them that opportunity to get to know the community that they're going to grow and live in. And that's how community affairs got started, with a modest employee matching gifts program at $1,000, which in 1985 was still quite a lot of money, given the size of the company. And that provided the catalyst for people like Will and Tazin and thousands of others, hundreds of thousands of others who've actually participated in the employee giving campaign, where they've been able to extend their growth mindset into purpose. And that's the book and the story that I've written by profiling over 25 Microsoft alumni and employees and telling their story of how they took this environment in which they were put into and some of the fortunate opportunities they had, and turned it from the focus on the me and self-growth to the focus on the we and the community growth. And I'd like to ask Will, you are a technologist, an entrepreneur, a computer geek.
I resemble that.
Yeah, I mean, and then you and Janet Levenger, your wife, somehow turned that knowledge and some of the gains that came from that knowledge into this tremendous investment into the community, not just in Seattle, but around the world. Talk to me just about that journey, Will. How did that happen?
Sure, happy to share. Well, let me start, I guess, a rewind in history a little bit. I started off as a tech geek, and I admit to that, at the age of 16. And that was in the early 70s, long before it was cool to be a geek at a young age. And fortunately, my purpose revealed itself pretty early on. And it was to solve really hard computer problems and make a pile of money doing so. Many geeks pursued that for many decades since then. But for an 18-year-old, that seemed like a pretty focused purpose. And I didn't really care about much else other than friends, family, and stereo equipment. That was my life. And that purpose served me well through 4 startups, 2 of which failed and 2 of which were successful. Thankfully, 1 of which Microsoft acquired, which is how I ended up in Seattle. And about 2 things happened, though, from a purpose perspective early on. One is that I kept meeting people who had made a lot more than enough money from my perspective, many tens of millions of dollars, if not 50s of millions of dollars, and they still were not very happy. And they were continuing to chase the money for reasons that weren't apparent to them or to me. And the second thing, because of Microsoft acquiring us, is that my wife and I had made enough money to be modestly comfortable and not to have to work for more if we didn't want to. And that really was what was the inflection point that caused me to start to seek more purpose in life, as I was only 35 at that time. And so thankfully, a few more important things transpired over the next couple of years. One is I saw Bill, as you noted, who was starting to pursue massive undertakings in education and global health and poverty reduction via the foundation. That was a role model for all of us at the company. My wife, Janet, joined this new organization called Social Venture Partners, which was new at the time in 1997 as a nonprofit combining the concepts of venture capital with nonprofit social innovation, and it was very appealing to those of us that had made our money through venture capital means. And then through extensive travel in the early 2000s, I saw firsthand the vast majority of the world's population was on the wrong side of what they called the digital divide back then. Basically, they did not have access to the web, they didn't have access to computers or phones or data, and they'd stay that way for a really long time. And that seemed like a grave injustice and loss for the world. And I read a book that I highly recommend everybody to read if you haven't, by the late Paul Polak. And he introduced the concept of being a seeker. And I really resonated with this. Always learning and seeking bottoms-up solutions to the most vexing challenges, particularly focused on poverty was his focus. And it was a combination of all of those things that really drove me to my second calling after I decided to move on from Microsoft, which was to apply the best principles of capitalism and global business innovation to a higher level goal, which is to make money for myself and others, but at the same time to truly make the world a better place at the same time. And most people call this particular flavor of what we do impact investing. And it's going to keep me busy until, well, I can't do anything else when I'm 90 or 100. So my primary focus was then and still is on what they call the base of the economic pyramid, those making under $10 a day in family income. You know, other people focus on the environment or racial equality, and all of these things are super important, and all of them really have to be addressed if we're going to get the world headed in the right direction before we screw it up irrevocably for our kids and grandkids. So, you know, coming back to one of my original observations, that I just saw so many people, particularly in the tech industry, that were wealthy far beyond their needs, but they were still unhappy. And they were lacking the one thing that I and others have been fortunate to adopt, which is a really big goal driven by a purpose mindset to help you chart and rechart your path forward. So that's my journey.
So, Will, I mean, you know, you mentioned something to me in our interview, which I'm hoping that you'll be able to share with our audience, that here you were running a major profit center for Microsoft, right? Windows and Windows Client. And that experience somehow got you to start United's seed fund and Capria. Talk a little bit about that, and then what are you now doing at Capria?
Well, it really was, it was that travel that I was doing in the early 2000s, particularly to emerging markets. And I went to all of them multiple times, and particularly to India, in search of how do you grow a very large franchise, which Windows was at that time. I think it still is. And how do you grow that into populations that are simply not getting access to technology? And that's, you know, seeking an understanding of that on a firsthand basis, sitting in the living room of a lower middle income fruit and vegetable cart owner outside of Bangkok, and seeing how she had bought the first computer for her family ever to help her kids' education. These kind of experiences just move you to realize how much things that you as a global business leader, in my case, could do that would truly positively impact people that not only themselves, but their kids, their families, and multiple generations thereafter, because giving access to education is maybe one of the most important things that you can do for anybody. And so that's really what I found. You know, I was a digital media geek before that, and that's all I cared about, and from a tech and professional perspective. And then I realized, you know, there's bigger things than technology. It's applying technology to helping the human race really become better, and helping people fulfill their potential. And so that led me, you know, when I left Microsoft, I did not have the infrastructure of a global company to do this kind of work. And so I set out to form an investment fund so that we could find like-minded people that wanted to put money into other commercial ventures that would have this combination of profit and purpose. And it's an important thing that some people get confused, and they say you can't have both, or you have to give up profit if you really want to have purpose and impact. And I actually emphatically disagree with that. I believe it is entirely possible to be a profit maximizing capitalist while at the same time being a responsible citizen of the world and building businesses that are going to truly serve customers, the environment, and the broader community as well as they can, while maximizing profits. I think that is possible, and not only more than possible, I think it's an imperative going forward.
Give an example of the work that you've done with Capria. It's very fascinating. So, and it's really the way to epitomize purpose and profit.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'll start with the work we did in India, because that was really the beginning of this. And we simply started actually investing. It's very timely that you asked this question. We started investing in ed tech when nobody else was investing in ed tech. This was in 2012, and there were very few companies able to raise money from venture capitalists in ed tech. People didn't think there was a lot of money to be made there. And we made an investment of under $200,000 in a really smart entrepreneur. And just yesterday, this guy, 6 years later, raised $40 million at a nearly, I don't know, $150, $200 million valuation for a company that is scaled globally now, and it's using stay-at-home moms to teach math over the internet to kids not only in India, but also part of the Indian diaspora in Middle East and the US and elsewhere. They're scaling like crazy. Sequoia, Google's invested, many others have invested, and they're one of the high flyers in ed tech in India. But again, when we invested, people weren't taking risk at all. So our principle here is to find the things that are going to be scaling in the future, hitting particularly the mass populations of the world, and invest early and often in the best entrepreneur that are going at those things, recognizing it might take a long time for these businesses to come to fruition, that you can make more money more quickly by investing in the hot e-commerce or gaming startup, but you might have more money in the long run if you go after the next 6 billion people in the world who are disenfranchised by technology. And so we started this in India, we've done 30 investments there, and now we also are applying the same principles through partners around the world, and that's what Capria is realizing we can't do it ourselves, but we have to partner with others who are themselves operating in interesting frontier and emerging markets, and help them, empower them to be successful investors, give them capital, help them raise from other people, and do the same kinds of things, invest in companies that are going to make good money, but make a difference.
Well, thank you so much. This is very interesting. Let me now turn to Tazin. Again, Tazin, congratulations for the Global Washington Hero Award. You richly deserve it. Tazin, your story is kind of very interesting. Again, you kind of come in to learn computer science, land up at Microsoft, but now you're doing healthcare and slum improvement projects and working with the Rohingyas in the border of Myanmar and Bangladesh. I mean, what gives you that privilege and the right to do that? I mean, you should be at Microsoft coding. You're on mute, Tazin.
Okay. Thank you, Akhtar, and thank you, Will and Kate and others. It's been a great conversation. It is a very interesting journey, to say the least. But for me, like I think, like Microsoft had a lot of Microsoft Give campaign, and then the Microsoft Philanthropies itself had a lot of thing to do in terms of where I am today. But as you say, I came in. I moved to the US when I was 18. I went there to study, and then my first job out of my college was Microsoft. And along the way, I've always been involved in activities when I was in Bangladesh over there through Boy Scouting, and then other activities at home. And then I also went to missionary school that was run by US missionaries who have moved to Bangladesh and have actually ended up staying here for like 40, 50 years. Many of them even died here. And then they had this purpose-driven mindset that they had, like setting up big education centers here. So I had that mindset already, but what Microsoft did is when I went there, my first year, I was actually in my grad school, and my professor didn't let me graduate without an internship, and it was a very odd time to get an internship. So I got a contract role at Microsoft that would consider as my internship, and then I got to see, like, October came, and it was a whole different world. I'm like, oh, this is not a software company, like all these people donating. And I think like that year we raised about 100 million or so. I could not participate, but I could see like, oh, the impact can happen. That changed my mind, and I ended up ditching going for my PhD program, and ended up staying at Microsoft for full time for the next 10 years. And that gave me the platform basically to set up Spreeha, because I always was involved in activities, but I wanted to do something around healthcare, which I've seen was much needed over here. I've seen people dying actually like without basic healthcare, and we started really small, and it kind of grew from there. And one of the benefits I had, like at Microsoft, I was not unhappy. Uh, I was super like and happy with my work. I was doing interesting projects. I was working as a UX researcher, so I would get to go and meet customers, learn from them, their pain points, and have that empathy perspective. So when I applied that to my work and then saw like how like the work was changing people's lives, and there was no turning back. And then we had like events where I got to meet people who have done that jump, like uh, we have John Wood and then Patrick setting up Assessing University. So all these examples were there. So at the end, like in 2016, 15, I kind of took the leap and moved to Bangladesh as our programs were growing. And it has been an amazing journey last 5 years, like looking at, because over there, like when I was in Seattle, I was still working on this, but being here full time, this gives the purpose mindset as you talk about it takes it to a different level. I think the first time you're talking about the Rohingya refugees, I think I wrote you an email just coming back from that trip, because I have never seen something like that. I was traveling with another ex-Microsoftie. She runs a nonprofit that provides solar lights, so we both traveled there. The refugee influx just had started like a couple of weeks back, and there were like literally like hundreds and thousands of people just crossing the border, and they had no shelter, no restrooms, no food, no clothing, nothing. And we realized we had to do something. And all the projects that I get involved in are pretty much like that. You get to see that, and there's basically no turning back. And at the same time, when you see like the work, your impact, and that drives you to do more, and on a personal level be more. So that has been kind of like the driving force for me.
So COVID has not stopped you, right? Your work
uh,
continues.
I actually like personally got tested
And you
positive.
got COVID and you recovered from it. So I just want you to tell us a little bit about that journey as to why, even in this time where all of us are being asked to hunker down, you've continued this work with the refugees and the kids in the slums of Dhaka. You're putting your life at risk doing this.
Basically, that's the life for all of us over here who are working on the front lines, because uh, honestly, like COVID has taken us back so many years of progress. Is gone. It is pretty sad. I remember in 2007-8 when we first started our program in Bangladesh. I used to come like during Christmas break, and I would come and visit the slums, and I would see kids not having enough food. And we started a food program in the schools, so where they would get an additional meal in our schools. And in 2015, we actually shut that program down because they had the ability to buy their own food. And then we kind of like, ended that program. They have graduated from that. And then COVID happened, and within a month when our schools were closed, so we started, our teachers started going door to door to make sure the kids are okay. And pretty soon, like within a month, we saw like more than 20% kids were malnourished, because most of the families are day laborers, and they were out of job. And within 2 months, that number went beyond 35%. So at that stage, you really like you cannot just stay home, or like you have to think about it. And one of the thing at Microsoft, I think like is pace that I was able to brought in terms of like the development world usually pretty slow. And we immediately started new programs. We had to run our existing programs. We are also a healthcare provider, so We had to run our clinic. But at the same time, we had to innovate in terms of how can we provide the services needed. For example, like a lot of the clinics were closed. Big hospitals were open, but clinics were closed due to the lockdown, and people were out of access for basic healthcare needs. So we partnered with a tech company in Canada and a media agency in Bangladesh, and together we built this very easy platform where you can just go to Facebook. Most people in Bangladesh, they have Facebook, the second most active city in the world when it comes to usage. So they can go from there, interact with a chatbot, select a doctor, and get connected via Facebook rooms right away. And in the first day, I think we got 2,700 patients that our doctors had served. So it was that much of a need, and we were able to deliver that. And it kept going on from there. And right now we are even running a food program for 50,000 people where we are providing them food support because they're out of job and basically like don't have enough to buy food.
If you had to give one advice to our listeners, and this is for you also, Will, what would you say at this time, especially with the efforts around the UN's, Sustainable Development Goals and the particular crisis that we face? What can all of us do individually to apply our resources and our purpose? Tazin,
I would actually take from what Kate mentioned during her talk about like working together. I think that has, we always talk about it, but it's I have seen there's so much roadblocks when nonprofits and for-profits want to work together. And then also Will talks about startups and social impact organizations. If we can bring all of them together and create look at how the needs again, going back to SDGs and what are the things that we need to address, and can revisit those. And I can give you some examples of how the good thing is I can see that happening already. So there is hope, and that's why I feel more people should come forward. We run a social impact incubator in Bangladesh, and this year alone, during COVID, we have incubated 26 startups, and we see a lot of need for this small startups that want to do social good, and they have ideas but they don't have resources. And this is where I Will talked about how they have invested in India and other places. This is where they can get the support. I've seen NGOs struggling because in Bangladesh and other developing countries, they're dependent on foreign aid, and that is being very hard to get during this time. So how can we all work together and come up with a framework where all these different types of organization come together and address these issues?
Thanks, Tazin. Will?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things. One is we currently have exposure to more than 60 companies around the world, all in emerging markets, but the difficult areas of developed markets are not that much different. And there's one common thread, which is that the pandemic has caused the adoption of digitalization to move at a pace that nobody ever could have imagined. And certainly if you're in the ed tech business, this has been, could not have been a better thing to happen to you. But it's not just that. It's small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses, all having to adopt new ways of connecting to people digitally, and people forcing to be comfortable with doing so. So I think it's to whoever it is that said, never let a great crisis go wasted. The opportunity for anybody, be they for-profit or nonprofit sector, to actually drive fundamental change through rapid adoption of digital technologies is like never before. And so recognizing that is happening, it's probably happening way faster than you think, right? There's people that are super low income people, out in the bush in the countries that we all, Tazin and I, work in, and they're using digital money now to sell bananas off a bicycle, right? That never would have been happening 2 years ago. There are people that are actually getting, learning on WhatsApp, and they're having their kids learn via that because they can't go to a school. So the necessity of connection via digital means caused by the pandemic is rippling so deeply into the fabric of the world that I think all of us need to really make sure we understand how we can harness that for the benefit of the missions that we pursue. And the opportunity is very much here. And I think you cannot actually overinvest in the space right now in whatever you do. And if you don't do it, if you don't move fast, if you don't embrace the tech, then things will go whatever way they go, but you won't be a part of it. So I think the deep embracing of digital tech to connect with mission and with constituents on both sides now is the time.
Thank you both very much. I just want to let our participants and know that one of the things that I discovered by talking to people like Will and Tazin and many, many others is that it is important for us to evolve our conversation from a growth mindset to a purpose mindset. And that it is not either or, but it is in addition to. And because of your growth mindset, you can actually apply those learnings and those tools to purpose. And to be successful in applying your purpose mindset, it is important to you, for all of you, to focus on your strengths. That's what Will and Tazin have done. Focus on your strengths, build on that. Don't get caught up in the scarcity world, but look at abundance that is out there that you can pull together. Be hyper-focused on the effectiveness of what you're doing versus the efficiency of what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, it is the impact that counts, not whether you did it fast or very quickly. In certain cases, speed is important. We need to go beyond thinking about organizations into igniting movements. What Will has actually done, and Tazin, they both ignited movements in their space where so many people have coalesced around them because of a higher goal. And an organization then just becomes a vehicle and a vessel to implement that, and the creation of the vessel or the organization is not the ultimate goal. And then how do you continue to be on this journey from generosity to empathy to compassion? And if we can be on that journey, most of us will never fully become compassionate human beings in the likes of what the Dalai Lama and Kailash Satyarthi, who have both won Nobel Peace Prize, say, where you're willing to sacrifice your life for somebody that you absolutely do not know because you want to help them. But we can come close to that by doing things collectively where our approach is not focused on the self as much as we do, but it is on the common good. And Microsoft and companies have a role to play by providing the space. And the Giving campaign just became that space for lots of different people to come together, break down barriers because around common causes that were focused on purpose. Not everybody has to create a Giving campaign, but creating that space where employees can come together. That's where they spend most of their time. And if they can learn and build that muscle around purpose, then we create bridging networks bridging networks, which allows us to talk to people with different persuasions, with different ideas, with different philosophies. And in this extremely divided and fractured world, bridging networks today are more important than ever, so that we can create a society that continues to progress and evolve and develop. And in doing so, we will not let COVID as a crisis go to waste. And this is our time. Get all of us to think about not what we want to be, but who we want to serve. And if we can do that, and I think that's what Will's story and Tazin's story talk about, is their persuasion on who they want to serve and how they go about serving it. So as we go into these holiday seasons, hopefully you will all have a fabulous holiday and enjoy the rest of the conference. But thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. The book is available at your favorite bookstores. Read it, talk about it, share with us what you are doing to activate your purpose. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much to all of you for sharing your insights and your expertise with us today. Coming up next are 3 breakout sessions. Please return to Whova and select Agenda from the far left panel, and then select the session you'd like to attend to be connected. Thanks again, everyone, and enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.